We are ready to start. Thank you.
Good morning, tēnā koutou katoa. I'd like to declare the Operations and Monitoring meeting for Tuesday, the 7th of December open. And can I remind councillors that the public section of this meeting is being recorded and live streamed. The webcast will be archived and publicly available on Council's website within 2 days after this meeting for a period of 3 years. Our purpose is to provide greater access to Council debate, decision-making and encouraging openness and transparency. However, Council accepts no viability for any individual opinions or statements. This is in accordance with Council's live streaming and recording of meetings protocol, which can be viewed on the Council's website. I also remind all present that local government decision-making offers no protection to councillors, council officers and the public for comments made during these meetings that are subsequently challenged in a court of law and determined to be slanderous. Thank you, councillors. Good morning, everybody. Can I remind you that your videos are turned on and muted, and formally open the meeting. So our first item for business is apologies. I have apologies from Councillor Thurston and Councillor Rose. Are there any other apologies? If not, would somebody like to move apologies, please? Just raise a hand. Thank you, Norm. Seconded by Jane. All those in favour, raise your right hand. Thank you. That's a consensus. Apologies have been accepted. Right. First order of business is public forum, and I'd like to welcome Graham Marshall along. Graham, as you'll recall, is chair of the Mount Maunganui Air Quality Working Party, and the Working Party has been in operations now for probably 12 months, Graham, and welcome along to our Operations and Monitoring, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say. The floor is yours. Good morning.
Kia ora koutou, and thank you, Chairman Winter. Well, as you said, it is 12 months since we started the Mount Air Quality Working Party, or since you instigated it. And I really thank you for the opportunity to connect in today. While it's been a challenging journey, the positive outcome is that a large majority of the participants want it to continue and engagement remains high. As you know, air quality is a highly complex matter predicated on past planning decisions, changing land use, and a community that expects to live with unpolluted air. And it's pleasing that while trends related to harmful discharges to air and exceedances have improved significantly in the last 12 months, there's still much to be done. So the key challenges for the Working Party continue to be, firstly, the real tension between the desire for elimination of harmful discharge to air versus mitigation. While many of the exacerbators have made significant efforts to improve their air quality discharges, as can be seen from your monitoring reports, the Whareroa Marae and some community groups are seeking elimination of the industries who are discharging harmful substances. Odours also are a key challenge and reinforce the view that the air is polluted. Your reports highlight the large number of complaints, and unfortunately attempts to change this through legal action has seen little impact. And this is going to be an ongoing issue. But despite these matters, and while there have been some challenging discussions at our meetings, and some very challenging, the opportunity for the various parties to meet and understand each other, to build relationships and have dialogue that would otherwise not have been likely has been a positive outcome for the Working Party Forum. While significant work and lobbying took place before the advent of the group, of the Working Party, and the group cannot claim lay claim to these developments, there have been some positive outcomes that have occurred during the year that have been supported by the dialogue the group has had. And these include, firstly, one of the largest log exporters through the Port of Tauranga has taken the decision to install a debarker. This will significantly reduce the use of methyl bromide use at the port and reduce dust issues as well. Secondly, the Mount Industrial Group have agreed to widening the network of air quality monitors in the area to independently record issues in areas not covered by the Regional Council. Thirdly, and while not necessarily related to air quality, there is some carbon sink in this. A beautification scheme has been instigated in the Mount Industrial area by community groups working with a number of industry. And so that was a consequence of conversations that have taken place at these meetings. A meeting was facilitated recently between regional councillors, Tauranga City commissioners, and the District Health Board. And there'd been a lot of finger pointing around roles and responsibilities in respect to the impact of air quality on human health and how this could be aligned. So this was to try and get the parties, or it was a very valuable conversation to get the parties to look at how the role they play in both current monitoring and future planning. And it's good to see the Tauranga City Council picking up that and wanting to have further dialogue. And I just want to pick up this last point. The key reason for air quality problems in the Mount is the result of poor planning in the past. And I think you'll see from the notes that you've got, there has been considerable inquiry into planning options to deal with air quality by our working party. And while it would appear that with current legislation, regulations and rules, the past decisions cannot be undone, it's critical that future planning has community health and well-being, as well as the environment, as a key platform. However, the challenge remains that there are so many entities involved at various levels in the planning process. The danger is that mistakes of the past could be repeated if the agencies are not working very closely together, understand each other's roles and responsibilities at the start of the planning process, are all actively engaged, and alignment is achieved early. So my encouragement for this council is that you work actively at all levels of your organisation, particularly at the governance level, to build robust and effective relationships. This will ensure that air quality that you are responsible for policing is front and centre and fully considered in all future city and regional planning. We've recently had a review session of our group, and at our first meeting next year, we'll develop our work plan for the next 12 months. The emphasis on that will be to seek areas of focus where tangible change can be achieved, because that's probably one of the areas of disappointment by the group, is that we're just not getting many runs on the board or action that creates change. So we'll have to look at areas that we can endeavour to affect that. I think there's also some acknowledgement that these issues have developed over many years and we can't change them in a short period of time. Look, can I take this opportunity to thank Councillors McDonald and Thompson for their contribution to our deliberations, their counsel, wise counsel, and Sarah Omenson and Rhys Irving for their commitment to this kaupapa and their support of the group. Thanks.
Thank you, Graham. Sage advice, working collectively with all the different agencies. Have you had an opportunity to have an audience with TCC?
Yes. Yes. In fact, we are very fortunate that two of the commissioners sit on the working party, and they are very, very heavily engaged and take this matter very seriously.
Thank you. So questions from Councillor Crosbie at this stage. Councillor Crosbie.
Good morning, Graham, and thank you very much for the update over the last 12 months, and can I acknowledge all the work that's being done. Can you just explain a little further how the independent monitoring is happening? Is that by companies or individuals, and how that links to the broader picture, please?
Look, can I defer that to Sarah, because she's got more information about this?
Sure.
Thank you, and through the chair. There's been some discussions at the industrial network, which is all of industry that are working together to look at what their mitigations can be and better understand their own discharges. And they have been collectively working through what additional monitoring could be put in place through the residential areas, not just in the airshed industrial areas. So they would like to see an expanded monitoring, and we are just working through what that might look like, how we could support it, the kind of machines and providers that could be used. And we are hoping that early next year, potentially to the first Monitoring and Ops Committee of the year, we can come back with some proposals or options of what they'd like to see done.
So look, just to add to that, if I may, I think this is acknowledgement that that network is taking this issue seriously and are actively looking at ways of having a part to play in this mitigation role.
Thank you, Graham. Councillor Nees.
Thank you. Good to see you, Graham. My question is with regard to the marae. I was very surprised to see a month or so ago an article in the Times talking about the potential need for the marae to actually have to retreat from that site because of the future impacts of climate change and flooding. Has that been raised at all in the Working Party meeting and discussions with iwi?
No, that's not a conversation that we have had. I think they see that as a very separate matter, and no, it's not been part of our equality discussion.
Graham, I'm reminded of the lessons learned from Rotorua Airshed. And 15 years ago, the Equality Working Party was set up to bring issues to the fore, and it was very clear that it was wood burners. Old wood burners was causing, I think it was something like 35 exceedances per year for Rotorua, mainly in June and July. And the RDC created some bylaws. They were handed over to Regional Council to administer. And in 15 years, I'm pleased to report we've gone from 35 exceedances down to 0 last winter. So this is a long-term game. And the trend that I've seen this year has been positive. It's downward trend. That's encouraging for us and yourselves, but it's a long-term game and it's a long-term solutions. But look, thank you for your work that you're doing. We really appreciate it. The survey results were very complimentary towards you in terms of the participants wanting to carry on and have good dialogue to coming up to speed with the issues. So thank you for your work. I know it's been tough, but we really appreciate you taking on this role and giving it a good progress coming forward. So thank you for that. Are there any other questions for Graham? Te Taru and Mati Moana. Te Taru? Can't hear you, bud.
Kia ora, Graham. It's Councillor White here. Thank you for your report. Much appreciated. Just for my own clarification, you made a comment around the issue around odour has been quite a challenge to get your heads around in that particular space. What are the key challenges? Because I note that we've had some challenges ourselves in terms of trying to secure and identify the origins of those odours and improving it. So what are the challenges for you in that space?
Oh, look, I think every meeting odour is raised, and it appears that in order to take action, it's a very subjective issue, and I understand that olfactory sensors are the only way in which it can be detected, and so everybody has different sensitivities to it. But it's certainly the community groups are reporting almost at every Air Quality Working Party the issues around odour. And we've inquired through the Regional Council as to what tools might be available to to take action to prosecute in some of these cases, but it appears really challenging. I'm not sure if you can add anything to that, Sarah, but I think this is going to be probably the most vexed challenge going forward is how the community is going to continue to be in their lived experience with odour in the Mount Eyre shed.
Thank you.
Did you want to comment? Mati Moana?
Kia ora, Graham. I've got no questions, but Graham, just to acknowledge really your chairmanship in the last 12 months, it's been brilliant. It's a challenging topic, and we've had challenging discussions around that table. And I just want to really thank you for your chairmanship in the group, and look forward to what we can achieve next year. So, thank you.
Kia ora, thank you very much.
Okay, Graham, that's the end of the questions. Thank you very much for your report, and no doubt we'll probably hear from you in 12 months' time again, just reporting in, and keep up the good work. Kia ora.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity, and thank you for your feedback. Kia ora.
Okay, good. Councillors, moving on to item 3 on the agenda. Items not on the agenda, there are none. Order of business is as per. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest? None. Public excluded business to be transferred into the open. There is none. And minutes of item 7, minutes of the previous meeting on the 7th of September. This is on page 9 of your agenda. Would somebody like the minutes be confirmed, please? Thank you, Stuart. Seconded by Norm. Any discussion on the minutes? If not, I'll put that motion forward that the minutes of the 7th of September be approved. All in favour, raise your right hand, please. Thank you. That's a consensus. Motion is carried. Moving on to item 8, reports. On page 20, the chairperson's report. There's just some food for thought there in some of the chair's report. Are there any questions on the chair's report, please? Councillor Nees.
Thank you. I've got a couple. Firstly, Huahi Paue Tribal Committee, are they mana whenua from Motiti Island? This is on page 22 with regard to the Motiti implementation.
Sarah.
Te Patuai?
No. Yes, sorry, it's my spelling, sorry.
Yes, Te Patuai, the Tribal Committee have mana whenua representatives that we have been working with through the implementation of the new rules. You'll appreciate that the landscape is complex, and we have been trying to work across as much of the community and hapu as we can, and keeping everybody up to date when we're invited to speak over at the island and talk about the implementation program we do. And as the report highlights, those mana whenua representatives that we've connected through Te Patuai have been helping us through the implementation programming for summer.
Thank you. Another question is around the Environment Court ruling with regard to mangroves and the coverage of the coastal marine area. Will the Regional Council work with other regional councils to discuss this? I was thinking that it is going to threaten some of our salt marsh habitats, and therefore it will threaten some of our native species. So is there any recourse to seeking amendments to the regulations? And a supplementary is, apart from removal of mangroves or mangrove seedlings, does this mean we can't remove any pest species from wetlands?
Mr. Ingle, those are good questions to you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Nees. Very good questions, and I think probably things that are exercising our minds Namuta, Sarah and I right now, and those of other North Island regional councils. So a letter has been written to the Ministry for the Environment by Auckland Council, supported by ourselves at Bay of Plenty, Waikato and Northland. And that sets out the concerns from Auckland Council's point of view. Obviously, there are legal options that are still being considered in terms of appealing that decision, or other options that are along the legal lines. But yes, certainly the concern I have is mostly around the fact that the court has crossed a jurisdictional boundary where normally we would expect the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement and our regional coastal plans to take precedence. And this decision has affected that assumption, I guess. And we need to be clear on what is the, can an NES that has the word freshwater in it also be applied in saltwater? And what are the implications of that? And I don't think we really understand how much those implications might be and how far they might extend. So this is a deeply concerning decision, which was why we brought it to the council as quickly as we could. And yes, the answer is we are working with our colleagues in other regional councils, particularly in the upper North Island, to try and help the ministry to sort their way through this one. Thank you.
Questions from Councillor Brunning and then Bondarelson. Councillor Brunning.
Yes, similarly around the High Court ruling on mangrove seedling control work, the effects of it. We need to be kept fully informed around this. We have a community out there who's put an extraordinary number of thousands of hours into mangrove control, and while we have drawn the line to no further control, there will be a lot of community interest around the Tauranga Harbour, and we have to take our communities along this journey as well. So I'm just wondering how we can perhaps re-establish the contact with the control groups that we had in previous years. So just wanted to highlight that. Moving on your report, Chairman, around the National Environment Standards for Fresh Water and regulations update, do we have timeframes around when these various effects come into effect, like when farmers will have to have their plans, etc.? I think I had one other question somewhere. No, that'll do for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And
timeframes?
The timeframes of those are all variable depending on the components of the NES, unfortunately. What we can do, and we've been reporting through the Monitoring and Ops Chair's report on this for the last 18 months as this is rolled out. At the next meeting, we will pull a table together which sets out very clearly what's already operative and for those things that aren't operative, when they will become operative. So that will be an action for us for the next report.
Norm, have you found your second question?
Yes, it's 2.9.2, Preparing for Water Services Act. The reporting I see has to be done by regional council, but this is on presumably largely TA, infrastructure, etc. So who pays for supplying this information? Presumably we're being supplied with samples and analysing on behalf of the TAs, but now we have to report. So can I have some information around that, please?
Through you, Chair, the supplier pays for the required sampling of their water supplies, and that covers the cost of our lab sampling. The reporting requirements for us are that we need to alert the regulator when there is a positive sample. So administratively, that's relatively simple. We've spent some time making sure our systems work seamlessly. As soon as we get a detection, that goes straight to Taumata Arawai. And the costs, as I said, the costs of sampling for that are done by the supplier themselves.
And apparently, under that same issue, Norm, there's about 5,000 registered private water suppliers that have popped up. That doesn't include the 90-odd thousand non-registered suppliers across the country. So this is a big issue for Bill Bayfield and his team to come to terms with this, and good luck to him getting everybody on board in 7 years. I think that's what he said he's got to do. But yeah, the costs are going to go back to the individual suppliers, and some of these private schemes, they run on a cost-neutral basis. So they have no reserves to implement some of these schemes, some of these UV treatment plants that are going to be, I heard $30,000 for a scheme or $2,000 for a bolt-on for a home. So it's going to be up to individual owners, but the schemes are run on a cost-neutral basis. Norm, is that all of your questions?
So just a supplementary, does that, I am assuming that the samples are taken after treatment and before distribution. It's not taken at source. Correct?
Oh.
We'd have to come back to you on that one. My assumption would be the critical part is when a tap is turned on, that water is clean. So where it's taken from in the system, I'd have to get back to you on that, Councillor Brunning.
We'll confirm that. Councillor Von Dettelson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Page 22, Te Patawai Tribal Committee, utilising them. I'm all in favour of that. I think that's fantastic, especially when we're talking about monitoring the science. I do have concerns about using them as a maritime, if they've been used in maritime patrol, because we have to be careful that we don't get into the situation like they have in Northland, where iwi groups are taking that compliance role. I'm talking COVID here, and then you get a fragmentation with your communities. So just need some assurance there. You were talking, I can't remember what number it is, about water quality and water shortages going through. We've heard that at Tauranga City, there are now questions about their new Wairere flow levels. I want an assurance, and it doesn't have to be today necessarily, but I want an assurance from staff that we have got robust data on the Western Bay, the whole Western Bay water quantity monitoring, whether it's just desktop or whether you've got now have managed to get sufficient data to make good decision making, and especially with the consent process, because otherwise we will get hooked up and fine processes won't go through in due time, and they will get appealed. So I'm very concerned about the water quantity issues in the Western Bay and need some assurances. With regards to mangroves, this council, since Bill Bayfield left as CEO, has moved to a much more conservative stance on mangrove removal. This latest appeal appears to be the thin edge of the wedge, and I support Councillor Brunning completely, that there's not only one, but there's many community groups that have worked exceptionally hard to hold back the tide of mangrove expansion. And I want to be sure that under this appeal, even though we had a consent for a mangrove machine, that we are still adequately consented for seedling removal and future seedling removal, and we don't want to get to 2023 and have to start the process then. We need to be thinking about it right now, and if we do have to apply for more new and more consents to hold back the tide. I'm not talking about existing mangroves, but I think we must hold back the tide on seedlings if we're going to have a sustainable harbour to the benefit of everybody. And then the last one is liquefaction issues. I was talking to, doesn't matter to whom, but to members of the local DHB, and it was highlighted to me, we're talking about COVID capabilities, that the hospital might be in an earthquake-prone area and might need to be replaced somewhere else. Now, this was the first I'd heard of this, and this is their excuse for not doing work on the latest building they built, which was about probably 7 or 8, might be 10 years ago. They built a 5-story building right on the Cameron Road boundary, and 2 floors have never been implemented as work. Yeah, they've remained empty as just storage for equipment. And I know this because I visited there they gave us 13 beds for a Rotary project to go up to the islands, and there's 2 full floors, and they say they can't afford to bring the wiring and the water up to standard to make them available for as wards. And when we've got a growing region like we do, it's really essential that our hospitals are fit for purpose. And I would have thought that was the easiest way. But so what I'm raising today is the issue, and we might need a report, a more detailed report on liquefaction and earthquake risk within the Tauranga Te Papa Peninsula and the Mount Peninsula, actually, to make sure that when we do our regional planning, that it is fit for purpose and that we don't get surprises. I mean, this is going to require long-term decision making, and I just wonder if staff want to comment first of all, and otherwise I'm asking that a report on these issues be brought back to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. You've got 4 questions there. Te Parawai, water quantity, mangroves and liquefaction. I'll get Sarah to answer each of them. And then Councillor Nees.
In terms of the Te Parawai compliance issue, the intent is not that mana whenua involvement in the monitoring of the areas would move into that compliance and enforcement space. It's about making sure that they are connected into the work, and really critically for us, we can't be out there all the time, and we have been asking that we get some monitoring done so that when there are a lot of vessels, you'll recall there's some concerns that there'll be displaced fishing effort around the island, which will really impact on food supply for the island. So it's just it's bringing mana whenua on board with the work that we're doing and making sure they're connected into the monitoring. In terms of the water quantity issues and the supply for TCC, our staff are working closely with TCC and Western Bay staff, and we actually have a meeting tomorrow to discuss this very matter. We have great modelling and information available, but as you know, the last 3 years have really tested our assumptions given the low flows. So we're getting a better understanding of the connections between surface water and groundwater. Tauranga City Council have been doing a lot of communications with the public over the last 2 months around supply issues, and that Waiari wasn't the silver bullet potentially they were hoping for. We are supporting them through their decisions that they're going to have to make, and any consenting matters that fall out of that, and bringing Western Bay involved into those discussions as well. So the modelling is good, but modelling is just modelling, and every new year brings us new information, which is impacting on those supply issues. But we are engaged, and we will report back on those discussions with the 2 councils tomorrow. In terms of the mangrove consents, Chris has already answered those, acknowledged that it's a significant issue for us. We've got 2 years left of that, the consents here. So some decisions need to be made around what we do depending on the outcome of the appeal on the High Court decision. And lastly, in terms of liquefaction issues, the liquefaction and earthquake risks are being reviewed by the Civil Defence Emergency Management Group now as part of the lead into their next 5-year plan, and all councils, including Tauranga City, which will, if that impacts on their lifelines, utilities and infrastructure like hospitals, are part of that conversation. And once we have got that updated risk analysis for those hazards, we can provide it through to the Monitoring and Ops Committee when it's available.
Thank you, Sarah. And also on page 31, Andrew, you'll see in terms of river levels, we've got a new simple, easy, mobile friendly environmental data portal view. So when it rains, we can see the river levels now. I think that's a really good tool to have. It's live. It's as the rain falls, you can see it. So that's another good tool that we've got in the toolbox as well. So questions from Councillor Nees and then Councillor Eadie. Councillor Nees.
Thank you. I had 2 further questions, and one of them has been raised by Councillor Von Dadelson, so I'd like to pick up on that one and then go on to my other, if that's all right, Mr. Chair.
Yep,
there was quite a discussion at Smart Growth about the water shortage issue. And in the agenda papers for that meeting, it was noted that Tauranga City planned to commission some research on the sustainability of water and aquifers, and I felt that that was our area of expertise. So I'm really pleased to hear that staff meeting with Western Bay and Tauranga City to work on that. I strongly believe that we need to do quite a bit of work in this area. We did have a Western Bay water sustainability strategy that was developed a number of years ago, and it said, everything's all tickety-boo. Western Bay has got too much water in the main, although there's some small areas where they're theoretically over-allocated. Since then, we've discovered that our data wasn't as robust, particularly in the Kaituna area, and that changed the picture quite a bit there on what could be allocated and from where. And now we have this new issue emerging, and I firmly believe it's time for us to pull together a very serious piece of work on water sustainability in the Western Bay of Plenty. And water was a work stream that had been identified by Smart Growth in the 2013 strategy, but that was never progressed. So I think now it's really past time for this work to be done, and I would like to see this organisation taking the lead, because this is natural resource management is our area, and we should be able to be providing really strong support to our TLAs, and they should be able to be trusting the information that we provide them. My next question is around the consents survey, and while there was quite a bit of satisfaction, about approximately 20% of respondents were dissatisfied in one way, shape or form. So it was noted in the report that there was some dissatisfaction about timeliness and costs. So I wonder, Sarah, if you would be able to comment on, could those concerns have been avoided, or were the timeframes and costs that these people ended up bearing, were they justified? If you could feedback on that, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nees. We do, when customers express concerns on the service they've received, we do work really closely with them to try and resolve it. And if there are the timeliness issues can result in cost implications, and when those costs are clearly because the service they've received hasn't been what you would expect, we will waive those costs. But on the whole, and I know a number of those complaints that have come through the system, we've got some issues around the expectations of information in water take consents in particular, and information we require when people are putting in consents to take water in potentially over-allocated or areas that are at their limits. And we do expect, A, that some modelling will be done and the effects of those takes will be very clear, and B, that engagement, particularly with tangata whenua, will take place. And so those are the key concerns that we've been working through. And at the end of the day, sometimes we can't resolve them. And they will be people who express their dissatisfaction with our service.
Councillor Eadie, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I have a couple of questions with reference to matters of interest on page 27. Firstly, that it's noted that Council did not seek costs against iwi parties with regards to the Environment Court awarding Creswell costs against Sustainable Otakiri and the iwi collective, that we didn't seek costs against the iwi parties. Did we seek costs against Sustainable Otakiri? Is the question.
I'm wondering if Ruben is on the line.
Ruben, are you online? There he is.
Yes.
Ruben.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Hi.
Good morning, councillors. Councillor Iti, the Sustainable Otakiri appeal was largely focused on the Whakatane District Council decisions. So we weren't put to extra cost because of that appeal. So no, we didn't seek cost against them.
Kapai, thank you, Ruben. Another question, Mr. Chair, is with regards to our submission with Tauranga, with TCC, to the Court of Appeal, and maybe just a gap in my knowledge, because I have seen a report on this, so I know it has come across our table, but just with regards to delegation of authority for going to the higher courts, is that something that comes before the council, or is that a delegated authority to the CEO?
That's a delegated authority to the CE.
I see. Kapai. Cool. Thank you very much. And lastly, just with regards to the fisheries granting the aquaculture consent to Whakatōhea, I know that there is an issue currently with Whakatōhea and Ngāti Awa, and that Minister Little ventured into that conversation, and Ngāti Awa is taking court action. I'm just wondering if there is any update with regards to how we may be involved in that, and where it's at currently. Kia ora.
Not sure if Ruben is
Ruben,
here
are you
again.
back online? Can you answer
yeah,
that one? Ruben, there you
I'm still
are.
here, but I don't have any information to update on that. My apologies, but Councillor Iti, I will get an update and get back to you.
Come on, thank you. Cheers.
Thank you, Ruben.
Got it, Mr. Chair.
Chairman Leader. Chairman Leader.
Thank you, Chair. Listening to the discussion prompted by Councillor Nees over the Waiari water scheme, I think we've got to be quite clinical and clear as to what is the question we're endeavouring to get answered. The issue of surface flows, subsurface flows is a real technical issue. And as Sarah said, you know, we used the best science at the time. But to me, the critical issue here is that TCC are just coming up to the commissioning of over $150 million worth of capital plant to provide potable water to the Greater Tauranga area. What I would like to know, and I think what is the critical issue is, given what is the expected offtake that plant will take out of the stream, and how does that align with the current water flows in that resource? Because you're not going to change the underlying issue in terms of the groundwater or the surface water flows in that resource overnight. You probably won't change it in 10 years. If you look at the rainfall data is essentially being average over the last 4 to 5 years from the information we've got in front of us, forecasting extra adverse events, if you take a El Nino or La Nina thing. So I think we have to be very clear from staff, what is the question you want the staff to answer? If I was TCC, it would be saying, spend all this money, I need to commission it. What is the available water source volume that's available to us? And I don't know the answer to that. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you, Doug. That's, we'll get back to you on that one. Okay, being no further questions, there's a resolution on page 20, receive the report. I'll move that. Is there a seconder, please? Thank you, Andrew. All those in favour, raise your right hand, please. Thank you. That's a consensus. Motion is carried. Moving on to Greg Corbett, the revised Regional Pest Management Operational Plan for 2021-22. Greg, you're online. Oh, good morning, Greg. Hi. Floor's yours.
Thank you, Chair. Morena councillors. This is really just a procedural paper following on from the amendments to our RPMP at council meeting earlier this year in November. So it's just the flow on there to make sure that our operational plan is in line with the new RPMP. We have added the additional 24 species to our sustained control program and Kauri dieback into our exclusion program. We're proposing to fund those programs for the current year through just reallocating budget from non-RPMP operations into our RPMP work. Happy to answer any questions, Chair.
Yep. Yeah. Any questions to Greg? Councillor Nees.
Thank you, Greg. A huge amount of work has gone into this. And I really enjoyed looking through and seeing how we were funding the different programs. I was reflecting that we've got some very large amounts in here for specific pests, particularly for wallabies and wilding pines, but other pests like catfish, etc. Are there overlaps, particularly for wilding pines and wallabies, with Jobs for Nature funding, where some reductions could have been made in our operational plan because there is external funding flowing into the region? So that's one question. The other question is around adding in the new pests. I couldn't make the figures add up. For example, you said that it's going to cost us an extra $130,000 for the next financial year, but Kauri dieback alone, you have $135,000 in for this plan. So I couldn't really see how it all fitted together. And the other thing is I felt it would be quite good to see at some point the trends in our expenditure over the various pest species. We spend quite a bit, for example, on Mediterranean fanworm and just how that is ramping up, how catfish is ramping up, how wallabies ramping up, and really then matching that with moving the needle on these pest species. So just some questions and general comments, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, for you, Chair. So the funding figures that you now see in the operation plan include external funding that's coming in, mainly from the Jobs for Nature package for wallabies and wilding pines, but also for Kauri dieback now. So MPI have just provided a grant of $105,000 to support our work for the rest of this financial year in there. As far as opportunities for us to lower our funding with the government funding coming in, we've really used our funding to leverage Crown funding coming into our region. So while there is the potential to have those discussions with Crown, that may also affect the Crown contribution to our programs. And happy to provide funding trends over the last, we can probably quite easily do the last 5 years without any problem, Councillor, and happy to either bring that back to this committee or to you personally.
Yeah, trends for the March meeting, Greg, would be good.
Yep,
I've got questions from Councillor Clark, Brunning, and then Von Derelson. Councillor Clark.
Yeah, good morning, Greg. This is, I guess, it's while I got you here type of question. Couple of things. Be really handy if you were able to share with us so I can disseminate any accumulated knowledge you have around your wallaby surveillance and methods of control. And I'm making that statement kind of more or less on behalf of the Manawahei Eco Trust, because I monitor what they're doing. I'm sure we can. And other thing, the possibility of been able to have some discussion with you around what are the constraints of basically forming like voluntary pest weed busters volunteer groups in the area, because I think there's an awful lot of scope to educate our public and maybe empower them to take more of a leading role in pest plant control in the area. But those are discussions I'd just like to book in with you into the new year. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Councillor.
Councillor Brunning.
Yes, I don't want to relitigate what decision we've already made, but seeing you're raising the wanting to try and find sources of money, I'm a bit confused around the Kauri dieback. You say MPI provide 105,000 around that. You've got 135,000 in our plan for the year, and DOC, or in conjunction with the Kamai Mamaku Trust, setting up a contract for management around Kauri dieback in the Karikari area with iwi groups. So Kauri dieback doesn't exist in the Bay of Plenty that we know of, and Kauri is mainly in the DOC estate in the northern part of the Kaimai. So I'm a little confused around what we are doing in this space.
For you, Chair, so we've got about 1,300 hectares of rateable land that was once Kauri forest, or still contains remnants of Kauri or regenerating Kauri. So the program, or the bid that we put to MPI, is to complement the work that DOC is already doing and rolling that work out into rateable land. And we are also looking at partnering with Kaimai Kauri for them to deliver that work on our behalf into that rateable land. So yeah, the kind of things that we will be doing or aim to be doing is looking at fencing of remnants that may have once or still hold Kauri lands, looking at intensifying our surveillance for Kauri dieback, not just in our natural Kauri forest, but also within Kauri trees that might have been planted for garden or ornamental purposes, just acknowledging the fact that some of those trees would be maybe sourced from Auckland or Northland 10, 15, 20 years ago, and may well have brought the pathogen with them in the soil. So we'll be checking that, and we'll also be looking at
ungulate control like goats and pigs in those areas where those animals might be moving between the Kaimai forests and rateable land, and potentially, if the disease is present undetected at the moment, could potentially be spreading it.
Thank you, Greg. Councillor Von Dadelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If we go to page 48 of the report, we're talking about compliance and who pays. And I'm a little bit concerned about the wording in there that when we come to the likes of KiwiRail, council will seek to encourage. When it comes to Waka Kotahi, council will seek to encourage. It should not be a question of seeking to encourage. We have a compliance and enforcement role, a monitoring and enforcement role as part of pest management. And if there is a pest on their land, we actually can demand. And I think I want to know where we're up to with Crown agencies and with local government, the territorial authorities, and with DOC to make sure that we are actually getting proper compliance by all these people, organisations, where it's in the community interest to control the pest in question. I'm a bit staggered by the wording there, Mr. Chair, and I'd just like a clarification. Thank you.
Great.
Yeah, for you, Chair, the Crown is not bound by the rules of the RPMP unless we have good neighbour rules. And early in the processes we're developing the proposal, Council chose not to pursue good neighbour rules, but look at how we engage with Crown agencies, Crown entities to partner with them to achieve compliance. That said, we've just had our first meeting with Waka Kotahi last week, looking at how we work with them to look at them providing some proactive control programs that meet the intent of the RPMP, and also how we will work together to resolve complaints. And we are also rolling out meetings with our territorial authorities. Now, territorial authorities are bound by the RPMP. So we're having similar discussions with them about looking at, can we work with them to develop proactive plans so we're not always in a state of just managing complaints as and when they arise with those agencies. So obviously we'd like to see proactive programs in place that hopefully minimise the risk of getting complaints from our communities back about pests on the land. As far as Department of Conservation go, the department we've had a long relationship with them where they provide, I think it's around $300,000 or $400,000 a year of pest work to support the delivery of the RPMP, mainly around boundary type issues. Our new MOU with them looks to protect that level of funding going forward. I hope that goes some way to answer some of your questions, Councillor.
Only just because in the early 2000s through to 2010, we actually did develop a very strong relationship with Waka Kotahi and what was then NZ Rail, and they were actively, I'm thinking of the route between Tauranga and Wakatani, making sure that pests on within their boundary were contained, recognising that farmers across the boundary fence had been very active in keeping pests out of their properties, and we had a very good relationship in that period. And it seems I'm disappointed to hear that we're only just starting to go back and work with them. I would have thought we would have had an ongoing relationship, and that's all we're asking for, is to make sure that it's a continuous conversation, because the last thing we want is for pests to be getting into farmers' boundary, so they're getting into the community from state organisations. Thank you.
Greg's heard you, Andrew. Thank you for that. Norm, did you have another question? No. Okay, so there's a recommendation on page 33 that we receive the report and we approve the revised 21-22 operational plan for the Regional Pest Management Plan for 2020-30. Do I have a mover? Councillor Nees, seconded by Te Taru White. All those in favour, raise your right hand, please. Motion is carried.
Thank you, councillors.
Right, moving on. Sorry, thank you, Greg. Moving on to page 156. This is the Balance Agri-Nutrients Limited Air Discharge Review, and I've got Ruben on the line and Shane, supported by Shane, David and Marlene. Hi, Ruben. Floor is yours. We're on page 156, councillors.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning again. So I do have Marlene from the consents team and Shane from the science team here today. David's not here, unfortunately, but those three have really been the key staff members working on this review of the balance report. The purpose of this report today is to really provide some councillors with information about how that review was carried out and what the results of that review have been. So with your leave, Mr. Chairman, I'd propose to take the report as read and happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, thank you and good morning, Marlene. Very comprehensive report about the modelling and the new limits. Really encouraging to read. Any questions? Councillor Nees?
Thank you.
Councillor?
Yes, thank you. Could staff tell me what the time frame for the process of reviewing the water and waste management consents is?
Thanks, Councillor Nees, and through you, Mr. Chairman. Both of those industry consent holders have got renewal applications in process at the moment. So we will be looking to implement the results of the modelling that was carried out as part of the balance review into those processes rather than reviewing those consents. They're both just on awaiting further information at the moment, and staff have ongoing conversations with both of those applicants. So we'll progress those as quickly as we can.
Oh, thank you. It's just there was a comment in the officer's report which said there may be cumulative effects or expenses if all discharged to the maximum allowed at their boundary. And the report says it wouldn't be in a location that would be hazardous to human health, but I'm concerned that an exceedance is an exceedance no matter where it occurs within the airshed, and also that there are workers on site. So I had a little bit of difficulty with that statement, but it might just be my understanding of what the officer meant to say. So I just wonder if staff could correct or clarify their position so that I can understand what they actually meant by that.
I can do that. So the modelling exercise is like a mathematical model that takes all kinds of wind directions and stuff into account. So what that showed was that if at the when they're looking at the three industries cumulatively at these new lower limits, there were two places where they could, if the right weather and if everybody was discharging at their max, where there could be an exceedance. The one is on the boundary between balance and waste management, because they share a boundary. So that's one location, and the other one was in the middle of the harbour, in the ocean. And both of those, the modeler, in her expert opinion, said that it was so highly unlikely that both of those, all three industries would discharge at their max, because none of them really do continuously at the same time and have the same, the right weather conditions for that to occur, that the chances were negligible. So we were satisfied that cumulatively there would be no real effect, and definitely we were focused on the closest sensitive environment where the closest residents are, which is Whararoa Marae. And there are no effects there under no circumstance, and none of the modelled scenarios give us any effect at Whararoa.
Councillor Von Daddelson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Page 162, the balance acid plant CO2 emissions graph. That looks a fantastic graph.
SO2.
SO2, yeah. Looks a fantastic graph, and you would look at it and say we need to commend Balance on the work they've achieved since 2016. However, it is quite a short period. It only goes from 15 to 19. I think it's 19, yeah, February 19. Is it, can we get emailed to us a graph that gives the same thing but over a more extended period and up to date, just so that we've got confidence in that graph that it's because of the short duration of it. But it looks fantastic to me, and when an industry does achieve those outcomes, if this is in fact a long-term trend, then we should acknowledge it, and it is definitely worth acknowledging. Thank you.
So, Andrew, just to clarify, you wanted trends previous to 2015? Is that what you said?
Yes, I'm thinking maybe from 2010 to up to current.
Up to present date, or as close as we've got.
As close as we've got, just to be. I mean, because that, are we getting a good picture with? If that's the picture that we're getting, that we are now, then that's fantastic. And I'm sure it probably will be a continuation, and it will be, but it's just too short a period before we actually, put out the high praises.
Thank you, Andrew. Ruben, that can be done next meeting?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. Yes, we'll seek that information.
And it can be done out of meeting. I mean, it's just an email in our weekly updates would be great, and then you could confirm it at the next meeting. Maybe.
Oh, I mean, this is something we're keeping our eye on, Andrew. So I think next meeting would be fine, Ruben, to bring it to public attention, a longer term time frame. Good as gold. Okay, there's a resolution on page 156 that we received the report for the review. Is there a mover for that, please? Thank you, Andrew. Seconded by Stuart. Thank you. Any further discussion? I'll put that resolution. All those in favour, raise your right hand. Thank you. There's a consensus there. Motion is carried. Thank you, Ruben. Thank you, Marlene. Keep up the good work, and no doubt you'll be reporting back to us. Councillors, I'd like to have a bit of a cup of tea break, and currently it's 10:40. We'll come back in 15 minutes, just before 11, please. So, cup of tea. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Tona.
Kevin, can you hear me?
Go, Norm.
I noticed Paula Thompson's not with us today, with no apology.
We're just having an update now, Norm, and Sarah, you've got some.
Councillor Thompson had just sent in apologies for lateness. She had a clash with a TCC meeting, so she should be in here shortly.
Fine.
And Kevin, you've got my note about my inability to sign in Diligent. I've asked for help, haven't got it. Can't really do much without Diligent.
Roger that. I'll keep you, when we do the resolutions, David, I'll make sure I read them out so that you're aware of what we're voting on. But there's nothing really more. It's only for information now anyway.
Yeah, no, just carry on. I mean, I'm in agreement with everything. So don't, just to let you know, I'm not going to be saying to, you know, that I haven't got much of an input to it. I've made some notes, but they're not.
David, I have I've got a link.
Councillors, we're still live streaming.
Okay. I do have a link, David, to a where you can download the agenda if you would like. I'll just pop it through to you.
You should have an email of it anyway.
Oh, I hadn't thought about that. Right, thanks for that.
Yeah, hey, people, we're on a break. We're still live streaming, so you need to hush up, please.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, this is not a hush up message, but I've got an urgent call at 11:15 that I have to take.
Okay. We'll note your absence.
Also, Mr. Chair, just while we're on that kaupapa, I have to depart by 1 o'clock if we're still going. So I'll be in a
we'll be finished by 1.
Beautiful, thank you.
Councillor Iti, are you there?
Yes, I am, but just a reminder that we are live streaming, Councillor.
Oh, okay. I was just going to suggest that we were due to have a meeting with Chris at 1:30. Possibly we could do it immediately after this meeting. That was all.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah, so Chris, could we get that message to Chris? Say continue this Zoom and have our wee after that. Cool. Kia ora.
Roger that.
Thank you, councillors, and I'll reconfirm the meeting. We're on page 171, which is the Mount Maunganui Industrial Airshed Update. There are 4 attachments to this report. The Mount Maunganui Airshed PM10 exceedances, the final working party minutes, and an overview of the survey from the working party and the request for release of amended national environmental standards for air quality. Can I welcome along Stephen Meller, Sam Wise, and Rhys Irving to the meeting? You're all on track. Yes. Hi, Stephen. Hi, Rhys. Good morning, and the floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you,
Stephen.
Chair. Good morning. Sorry, can you hear me okay?
Yep, good.
Great. Good morning, councillors. As the report's our latest in the series of updates that we present to Monitoring Ops, and during this reporting period, we've continued to see a downward trend in the number of NES PM10 exceedances, and as you'll see in the report, industry remains engaged in mitigating the dust issues, and as requested, we've added a sort of a national update on methyl bromide use. I'll take the report as read. Any questions? Thank you.
Any questions? Hi, Sam, you're online too. Any questions to either Sam, Rhys or Stephen on this, please? I'll just give it a few more seconds before everybody's back on. Looks as though we're still missing a few people, but any questions on Mount Maunganui Industrial Airshed Update? Councillor, Mr. Leader, Chairman Leader. Can't hear you, Doug.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Look, just a couple of issues. Firstly, out of interest, the issue regarding PFAS, current use in terms of firefighting foam, is PFAS banned? And if it is there an alternative that is employed in terms of firefighting foam? Because I think they still use some form of it. And the second one is on 2.5 on page 174. In my view, just a word of caution, when this regional council is prepared to fund independent planning expertise to assist an applicant in terms of submission to a plan change, just be aware that where does this begin and where does it end?
So PFAS, Stephen?
I can speak to that one. I'm not aware if it's banned, but I am aware that it is not included as one of the constituents of firefighting foam any longer. As far as it's banned, I'll have to come back to council on that one. I'd like to get the date and get a 100% sort of secure response from that.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. It's just, what is the alternative? That they must be currently using something.
Yeah, I'll have to investigate and come back. I'm not a PFAS specialist.
Okay. Thank you, Stephen. And just on the policy matters, Doug, the Plan Change 18, your question of us funding a submission, Sarah?
Yep, through you, Chair. So what we have been working with Ngāti Kuku on is ensuring that the plan change and the draft provisions that come through that plan change reflect and articulate the Ngāti Kuku's values. So it's not about funding a submission. It's not funding a submission into the plan change process. It's about ensuring right in through the development of that plan change that we are and can reflect those values appropriately.
Yeah, but it also raises the issue, there are other persons who may want their values as opposed to just Ngāti Kuku in here. So I just raise it, and my view is if there is a fiscal constraint in terms of some of these things in MFE, as a fund that applicants can go to. Whether or not it's applicable in this case, I don't know, but that's fine. Thanks.
Stephen, just a question from me. Stolthaven, what do they do? What do they store in their tanks? On page 107.5.
Excuse me a second.
Oil.
I would imagine it's oil and fuel, very heavy fuel oil.
Okay. Any other questions on the Mount Maunganui Industrial Airshed update? Councillor Clark?
Yeah, just a quick one relating to methyl bromide. I noticed something that said that one of the major log suppliers has agreed to supply debarked logs to the wharf so they don't have the methyl bromide process. So, I mean, what's got me a bit flummoxed is why aren't all logs going off debarked so we don't require methyl bromide? Is there a simple answer to that? Cheers.
I'm happy to answer that,
Sam,
Mr. Chair.
Yes. Thank you, Sam.
My understanding is that the company that supplies most of those debarked logs is Timberlands, and they own a particularly large holding of a contiguous forest. And all of their export logs go through a railhead in Murupara. So they have the ability then to set up that debarking facility at Murupara, and it's quite an efficient process. Whereas some of the other, or a lot of the other log exporters, their forests are not all next to each other. It's not one big block necessarily, and they don't all go through the same through a railhead like Timberlands have that opportunity to. So, yeah, in short, Timberlands, they have an ability to have a particularly efficient process.
Yep. Thank you very much for that. That's a logical answer. It still beholds the question that if methyl bromide chemical use is a major problem, there should be a facility that can cater for all logs going over the wharf with the debarking process. But that's a logistics thing that I'd be interested to see what happens there going forward. Cheers.
Thank you, Councillor Nees, and then Councillor Crosby. Councillor Nees.
So, Chair, perhaps I could give a bit more.
Oh, sorry, Doug.
So, the issue around debarking logs in terms of the practical reality is right. However, the exporting of logs is a foreign affairs and trade issue. So currently, any logs exported to India are required by way of accessing that market to be fumigated, regardless. Any logs that are sent to China should be fumigated to a degree, but all what they call top stow logs have to be fumigated in situ before they go across the wharf. So that's why we've always said this whole issue of fumigation of whatever chemical you want to use is conditional upon of getting access and agreement from the log importer in the international sense. So that's the only reason they do it. And as long as we can get away with exporting debarked logs, that is a benefit, but it's an acceptance from the market that, yes, that'll happen. But the risk here is that a debarked log gets in situ in market and they turn the whole ship around and send it back.
Thank you, Chairman Leader. Now I've got questions from Councillor Nees, Crosby, and then Brunning. Councillor Nees.
Thank you. The minutes of the Mount Maunganui Equality Working Party Hui, it's great to see those. It gives you a flavour of what discussions are being held. On page 186, there was a discussion about TCC zoning update, and a piece of work was requested on how the quayside holdings, smart growth and other economic drivers impact on the decisions around zoning for industry, and how are transportation and trucking being taken into account. And it said that the documents being produced to identify where and how council-controlled organisations are involved in this decision-making, how they're aligned, and to identify and avoid conflict of interest in making decisions on the spatial zoning of industry. Now, who's doing that report? And I mean, is it an internal report? Does it have to have a terms of reference or a scope? It just seems to be a quite an unusual request.
I can respond through you, Chair, and Councillor Thompson and McDonald, if you want to provide any updates as well. We provided the conflict of interest matters we dealt with separately. So we have, how we deal with potential and perceived conflicts of interest through our investments and through Quayside. So we have provided that to the working party as a separate matter to how all of those economic drivers fit together in terms of making those industrial decisions. And where we've got to with that is that TCC are looking at their industrial estate and what the options are around the industrial estate. And we were inviting Quayside to come and talk to the working party about how they make their decisions and how they work with TCC and the Bay of Plenty Regional Council in making those decisions. So we split that action into two because we felt that the conflict of interest matter needed to be dealt with immediately, and that wider issue of the connectivity of industrial areas, future planning, and TCC's city plan are really long-term matters that we just need to have continued conversations on. But Councillor Thompson or McDonald may have something to add on that.
Councillor Thompson? No. Councillor McDonald? No. Question from Councillor Crosby.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to go back to a comment Graham Marshall made in his update, where he spoke about poor planning of the past, which was obviously quite relevant. Now, you can go back to Mount Maunganui, to the old Town and Country Planning Act, the Resource Management Act, which was based on effects. And I think in hindsight, what has happened is there's been a failure in identifying the cumulative effects. And that's come out in the Randerson report and is part of the hopefully new planning regime moving forward. So focusing on the future, I think there's a lot of learnings to come from what has happened in terms of the Mount Maunganui industrial airshed versus the residential growth and development of Mount Maunganui and surrounding areas. And essentially what we have to keep our close eye on as we move forward into the new planning regime is to make sure that the growth opportunities and the environmental trade-offs, because that's effectively what they are, land in the right space, because clearly they haven't landed in the right space historically. And then you overlay that with what's now the Regional Council's responsibility, post-89, of monitoring compliance, etc., and enforcement. And again, it's identified that there's been a reluctance often for regional councils to take appropriate actions early on in the piece. And again, that will form part of the resource management review. So I felt Graham's comment was accurate, but not in context. It's easy to sit back in hindsight and say, well, that didn't work, because it didn't, but we've got to look to the future now.
Thank you, Stuart. And Councillor Brunning?
Yes, thank you. My apologies. The host had disabled my video for a time once we resumed after the morning break, but back online now. Just I think a correction maybe around the debarking of logs. Small operators are able to debark logs. They've done it on my property with a machine that just rubs up and down the logs, and they're exported as debarked logs. One other point, can someone just explain a little bit on page 180 what that map is telling us? It's rather small, and I can see colours, but I can't see the writing. Thank you.
my understanding, that's wind speed and wind direction and cumulative effects of wind direction. Sam, Reese, Stephen?
Through the
correct?
chair, this would be the Mount Maunganui airshed sites.
Yep.
So those what look like are rather pretty ink blots are highlighting the direction of TSP. So you get the darker colours in the kind of quadrant where the kind of sources are coming from, and the kind of the blues from the kind of lower sources. So where you've got that kind of dark, kind of reddy brown, that's sort of giving you the direction, taking into account wind direction, where the source is coming from. Does that help a little bit?
Yep. So red is bad and blue is good. Well, higher and lower, I should say that.
Yeah, if you look at the mean and the legend on the left, it gives you a kind of idea of the higher levels where you've got that red.
Yeah.
In relation to the wind direction. Shane would maybe explain better, but that's the way I understand it.
Yeah, that's the way I understood it too.
So that
okay,
shows,
no further questions.
So that shows how the particulates are being distributed and pan out over a wider area.
Through the chair, it gives you an indication. Oh, sorry, Sarah.
I was just going to say, essentially what it tells you is that the most dust is being generated from those areas shown in red based on our wind and particle monitoring.
Okay. All right, if there's no further questions on Mount Maunganui Industrial Airshed update, pleasing to see, Sarah, that the salt spray was, Minister Twyford disregarded the heavy salt spray on a couple of occasions, and that's what we're dealing with. You know, it's a combination of things, and so they saw that through, that it's been dismissed. Okay, so on page 107, sorry, Stephen?
May I amend my earlier answer in regard to Stolthaven and put on the record that the facility stores chemicals, vegetable oils and tallow, rather than me saying that it was heavy oil, please?
Oh, right. Yep, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Page 171, we just received the report. Would somebody like to move? Councillor Nees, seconded by Councillor Brunning. All those raise your right hand. Thank you for that. Motion is carried. Moving on to Rotorua Air Quality Implementation Program Summary, and online I've got Marion. Oh, good afternoon, good morning. No, it's good morning still, Marion. Hi. And Shane is online too, I believe. So this is on page 196. Marion, floor's yours.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for this opportunity to provide the committee with a summary of the Rotorua Air Quality Implementation Program. I'm pleased to report that the airshed for the second consecutive year has met the National Environmental Standards for Air Quality. The program is about to move into stage 3 of the Compliance and Enforcement Plan. The report also highlights some changes ahead. The government is reviewing their air quality standards, and they've indicated a move towards PM 2.5. The Rotorua airshed is not expected to meet the PM 2.5 standards without further pollution reduction measures. We're waiting for the government to release their standards. Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm taking the report as read, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Marion. Yes, good news and bad news, I guess you could say on the for today. Yeah, it's been a long time coming, but yeah, the rules are getting tighter. The rule book's getting tighter. Questions from Councillor Nees and Brunning. Councillor Nees.
Thank you, Marion. Good to see you. So how many wood burners are still outstanding in the Rotorua airshed, and have we done any modelling that if we managed to get rid of all of those, whether we would comply with what's likely to be the PM 2.5 standard?
Through you, Mr. Chair, do you mean how many non-compliant wood burners are in the airshed?
Yeah, that one.
Right. That's a really tricky one for us to answer. We can never come up with an actual number. And that's because we are missing some gaps in our information. So when people remove wood burners from the airshed, they're not obliged to tell anybody. We know that wood burners get removed when they do renovations. We know that wood burners have been replaced for gas fires and heat pumps, but there's no national register for heat pumps or gas fires. So those are the things that we're missing. We have all of the information from Rotorua Lakes Council on compliant wood burners, what's been installed. We also know what's been removed and replaced through our incentive schemes, but we can never give you an actual number of non-compliant wood burners. However, in saying that, it's important to remember that on the 31st of January 2020, the final regulation, the solid fuel burner regulation that came into effect, was a ban on all non-compliant wood burner use or solid fuel burner use. So we imagine that like 15% would equate to about 1,200, but that's a very conservative figure because we don't know what has been removed. And in saying that, none of those 1,200 wood burners that are non-compliant are able to be used under the solid fuel burner regulations.
Question from Councillor Brunning.
Yes, it takes me back to previous discussions we've had around new areas of house building that still allows the permitted fires, and you've just got to question why we are still allowing that if we're moving to 2.5 PM, 2.5, and that's going to put an added burden on the existing people, and then we've got new people still putting in burners, but they may be compliant, but certainly must be adding to the problem.
Through you, Mr. Chair, there are regulations in force that don't permit people to put in new burners into the Rotorua airshed. We're also we're waiting for central government to approve a boundary airshed extension, which will incorporate all new subdivisions that are happening now and are proposed to happen in the future. So that future-proofs the airshed and future emissions from wood burners. The only way someone can install a wood burner, a new wood burner, so we're talking about a wood burner going into a property that doesn't currently have one, would be they have to apply for a resource consent through the regional council, and they have to offset the emissions by removing a wood burner from another property within the airshed. So it's quite strict. So we have future-proofed that.
So Marion, the extension of the airshed, we've asked for it to be extended to include new subdivisions. Do we have a time frame on that? Because I see there are new subdivisions being approved, like at Pukehangi, 197 homes. Have we got a time frame for that decision to come through?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we should have received our answer from MFE. They are taking their time. We don't know when we're going to receive their answer. We're fully expecting them to approve it. We don't foresee any issues with that one whatsoever. It's just their timing. I think their focus is on other areas at the moment. We're expecting an answer on the 30th of September, but that's didn't happen.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions to Marion? Good report, good news, bad news. Watch this space.
Yes.
Okay, there's a recommendation on 197. We received the report. Would somebody like to move, please? Councillor Eadie, seconded by Councillor White. Any further discussion? I'll put that resolution. All those in favour, please raise your right hand. Thank you. Motion is carried. Moving on to page 210, which is the overview of the World Health Organization Global Air Quality Guidelines and our 2021 preliminary data. Again, we've got Stephen, Shane and David Eade on the line. Stephen, are you there? Yes, good morning, good afternoon. Floor's yours.
Good morning again, councillors. Again, we have a report here which was for your information, so I'm going to stick straight to questions, and if that's okay, and take it as read.
Yeah, any questions to Stephen or Reese or David? No, no questions? Gosh. Would somebody like to move or receive the report? Thank you, Stuart. Seconded by Councillor Nees. Any further discussion? I'll put that resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Oh no, raise your right hand. Gosh, this just goes back into automatic mode, didn't it? Raise your right hand. Yep, that's a consensus. Motion is carried. Thank you for that. Moving on to page 220, which is the Regulatory Compliance Activity Report. And on the line, we've got Alex Miller and Stephen Miller. Over to you, Alex. Yeah, good morning. This is on page 220. Floor's yours, Alex and Stephen.
Thanks, Mr. Chair and Morena councillors. So through the chair, I don't have a PowerPoint on this report. My intention is to largely have the report taken as read. But if you can give me a few moments, I wouldn't mind just picking up on what I see as a few of the notable points from the Compliance Act
certainly, go ahead.
last financial year. Thank you. So in terms of our compliance monitoring function, so the actual process of going out and looking at resource consented activities, we've continued a trend of increasing our inspections on previous years. I think that's probably likely aided by the fact that we had a year that was largely uninterrupted by lockdowns being on either side of it. And in addition to that, we had some projects that were really dedicated to catch up on some of that work that was missed through that first round of lockdowns in early 2020. What's really reassuring is that as we are getting out there and seeing more and more, the compliance levels are largely staying the same. So we're sort of seeing 80% compliance and a really small amount of significant non-compliance. And that's reassuring because that indicates that what we're seeing when we do our compliance inspections each year is largely probably pretty representative of what's happening out in the wider community of consent holders. What was also really good was when we had a look at the national CME metrics report, which was provided through to councillors recently. All of our numbers in there actually compare really favourably to what we see elsewhere. And on top of that, we have some pretty strong internal quality assurance programs going on now, which gives us some real confidence that they're pretty accurate too. So that's really good to see that we're kind of sitting at the upper side of average on a lot of those numbers. You'll also see that we had a pretty big year in the enforcement space with some really strong decisions coming from the court, including closing off some particularly long-running sagas, such as the Kawerau tyre stockpiling, but also some cases which had a really significant public interest, such as the Ziwi air discharges and Tauriko business estates discharges. So that was really encouraging to get. One of the other stats in the reporting which came out, which is quite interesting, is that for the first time since we've really started reporting on this, which is coming up sort of 7 or 8 years now, is that the number of the complaints we receive through hotline has actually dropped. We don't really know the significance of that yet. It dropped by about 2%, and I guess we'll just keep monitoring that over the next few years and see if that's actually the start of a long-term trend of actually addressing some of these issues and seeing those numbers drop, or if it is just a marginal blip and things sort of go back to those long-term trends. And from there, I guess we can just really look to what comes next. And the 2021 and 22 year and onwards, there's obviously quite a lot happening in the CME space. From a regional council point of view, we've got some new and exciting work with the NES for freshwater implementation really ramping up and progressing. We're also commencing our expanded permitted activity monitoring program, which was requested by councillors through the last long-term plan process. So we've now recruited for those positions, and we're starting to get that program up and running. And then obviously at the national level, we're looking to the reforms and just making sure that we can feed into those as positively as possible and set ourselves up for success through whatever the reforms do throw at us. Those are largely the points that I did want to cover off. If there are any other questions, certainly happy to take them.
You've been busy. Your team has been busy. I mean, I look at the front page, 11,676 performance monitoring returns from consent holders. That's a lot of work. And yeah, hats off to you and your team, Alex, because difficult circumstances, being lockdowns, you know, and we've still got to do the business. So congratulations to the team of performing those monitoring returns and under trying circumstances. So well done. And there's some big issues. You know, when you look at that chart on page 224, you know, when it gets to the courts, your guys and girls have done a lot of work behind the scenes to get it to that stage, to make sure that the judges have the right information at the right time. So a big effort all around, really. Our environment's the better for it. Chairman Leader, and then Te Taru White.
Thanks,
Chairman
Chair.
Leader.
Just out of interest, are you able to tell us what is the current court list wait time from the point of laying the information, dealing with, firstly, guilty pleas, and secondly, not guilty pleas?
That's a good question. It is still very variable. I think this is really only anecdotal, but what we're actually seeing is somewhere around 18 months to 2 years from the time of laying charges to getting an outcome. In some instances where it's simpler, where there is a guilty plea and not too much pre-trial negotiation or argy-bargy, it might get done within the year or less. But yeah, quite frequently it is sitting at the courts for a good stretch of time. The other thing is that I think what we're really seeing is even with a guilty plea, that's not a guarantee that it'll go through quickly because of the amount of points that are contested running up to the pleas even being entered. So it is a difficult operating environment. The regional sector, the regional CEs group, I should say, have requested that the CSIG, the Compliance and Enforcement Special Interest Group, prepare a report on that very point, on what some of the barriers and challenges around our enforcement program are. And that is delving into a whole range of things, but it will also cover off the cost and timeliness of court proceedings. So that's what I've seen sort of anecdotally within our business, but we'll have a bit more clarity on that when that report's finalised, probably later this year or early next year.
Thanks, Alex.
Yeah. Te Taru, and then Norm.
Yeah, good report, guys. Thank you for that. Just looking at on page 226, the implications for Māori. Down the bottom, it says, in practical terms, this may include ensuring tangata whenua are notified of incidents in their rohe, no surprises approach, and seeking involvement in projects where appropriate. Have you had to employ this on many or any occasions at all?
Oh, go on. Sorry, Alex.
Oh, no, there's probably more Stephen's space. Yeah, I'll leave it to you, Steve. I
think the best example of that is when we notify after an incident that's come into the pollution hotline, especially something like a reasonably significant spill into the harbour. We send a notification out via some assistance from our comms team.
And I think on top of that, I'd also add that we are looking at more and more in the kind of proactive project space as well. So we obviously have our initial responsibility to notify tangata whenua when something goes wrong, but also how can we bring them into those projects that we want to do in the Bay, and things like the implementation of the Mōtiti protection areas with Te Patawai, which was discussed earlier, and the Marae Offset program. So the short answer, I think, is yes, we certainly do bring those into it.
Yeah, thanks, because I do like the proactive approach. It's better than reacting to the problem at the end. Like, Thanks, guys.
Yep. Councillor Brunning.
Yes, noting the prosecution around the illegal stockpiling of tyres, where are we at now with tyres? I mean, the Minister was going to be doing something. I know Winston's now taking it for their cement processes in Whangarei, but we've had other stockpiles that we've had to move on. So are we still getting stockpiling, and what percentage of our tyres are being recycled these days?
From, I guess, speaking through the chair in respect to the pollution hotline, we're not aware of any significant new stockpiles. We also have the NES with tyre storage now, so we do have an extra tool in our belt when it comes to any significant stockpiles that we are made aware of. So I think we're in a much better space than we were 6 months ago.
Thank you, Stephen. Any other questions? No, if not, there's a resolution on page 220 that we receive the report. Receive the report 2021 Regulated Compliance Activity Report, Diver Mover, Mati Moana, seconded by Norm Brunning. All those in favour, raise your right hand. Thank you, that's a consensus. Motion is carried. Moving on to page 229, which is the Land Management Focus Catchment Highlights. And online we should have Jackson. You're there, Jackson? Yes, you are. Good afternoon, good morning. I'm not sure now. It's still good morning. Gosh, they were doing well. Jackson, welcome along.
Thank you, Chairman Winters. Morena councillors. This paper provided some end-of-year highlights on the progress of our Coastal Catchments Land Management Program. As you'll recall, our land management program has been narrowed down into these focus catchment areas where one of the 4 water quality attributes, such as nitrogen, phosphorus, sediment, or E. coli, are requiring significant improvements. And in this way, our work program is directly aligned with the highest priorities of the NPSFM implementation. So we're offering incentives and education and awareness for that voluntary uptake ahead of any 2024 plan change that will take over with new policies and rules to bring about change. And so in these areas, our core land management functions like stock exclusion, fencing, land retirement, planting work, we are operating around the drainage schemes with best practice upgrades. We have some capital projects around detainment bunds and treatment wetlands. We investigate farm systems analysis and farm planning approaches. And of course, most of these focus catchments now have emerging and successful community or catchment groups, which we're very supportive of. And some of those groups are going on to also get their own independent funding from other partners. So we're just coming into the 3rd year of this program now. And our council investment has been supported by the likes of some co-funders, such as the Ministry of Primary Industries 1 Billion Trees Fund. We're awarded 1.5 million in 2020 to support our programs. This funding has gone exclusively to natives with an emphasis on right tree in the right place so that we don't burden any future generations with inappropriate plantings. And proud to report we've just surpassed the 50% milestone on this project, where we have put over 460,000 native trees in the ground, and the same amount again confirmed to be planted through signed farm plans with our communities. And this has been really important for incentivising retirement of critical source area pathways where contaminants are entering into our focus catchment areas. And of course, the other big funding partner has been the Jobs for Nature COVID Recovery Fund that we received, over $3 million directly towards on-the-ground fencing and planting activity in our focus catchments. This is a significant increase in our operational expenditure, over doubling of our work program. And the ministry didn't contribute to any new council staff time to deliver this work. So kudos to our land management officers who have been incredibly busy over the last year, delivering this work, which has allowed our farm plans to be of a much higher quality, and the pace of delivery has been much faster. MFE themselves are quite interested in the social outputs of this work. So we've been keeping tabs on things like the people hours worked, and the fencing and planting contractors in the community have, over the first year, worked over 23,000 hours towards this project, which is quite impressive. Some really good fencing and planting stats coming out of this program, and we expect those numbers to double over the final year of the program. As a requirement of the deed of funding with the ministry, we recently were required to engage in external independent audit, and we're pleased to report full compliance with that audit. Our administrative processes at the council and all the deed of funding conditions have been met. The funding has been expended appropriately, which really puts us in a great position to put ourselves forward for future funding opportunities as the delivery experts in this space. And in the report, you'll see we're utilising these focus catchment scorecards. A huge amount of work goes in behind the scenes to produce the information in these. Our land management officers go through complex negotiations with landowners. They write up the agreements. So they are often coordinating the delivery of the program through engaging contractors and things. And so at a glance, the scorecards are a way to look at the funding investments, the leverage that we're getting for our council dollar with these different funding partners, and most importantly, that action on the ground that will ultimately contribute to water quality improvements like our length of fencing, our land retired, and our trees planted. So I won't go through each catchment, but feel free to look them in the report, and happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Yeah, very well laid out. Thanks, Jackson, for easy reading and easy reconciliation. Thank you for that. And congratulations on that audit report from that independent auditor. That's good news. It holds us in good stead for any further funding opportunities into the future. So I've got questions from Pim. Did you want to say anything? Welcome aboard. Did you want to add anything to the report?
Thank you, Chairman Winters. No, I think Jackson's covered it beautifully.
Okay, questions from Councillor Clark. Bill?
Hi, Jackson. Yeah, great to see all those trees growing into the ground, but can you tell us going forward, maintenance and monitoring of those trees to make sure they do survive and do what they're supposed to do? How are we looking in that space?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. The funding conditions with Ministry and MPI require at least 80% survival. So we monitor for that quite closely, and we are very successful with meeting that target in our projects, given we undertake good site preparation and use the right species. And our programs always include a 2 to 3 year maintenance period at the outset, which gets those plants through to a point of being self-sustaining, hopefully.
Delighted to hear it. Cheers.
If I could just add one thing to that, we are undertaking a trial during 2022 with plants that are significantly cheaper per unit. They are root trainer grade stock. They only cost 70 cents each compared to the $2 to $3 price range for a PB3 that we usually use. So there's a higher risk of failure, but there's obviously a lower per unit cost to purchase. The last time this council tried this grade of plant for something other than dune restoration was in the late 1990s, before any of us were here. And at that point, it was decided it didn't work. But given the number of plants, we're trying to ascertain whether in places where good maintenance is available and where the sites aren't particularly difficult, where we might be able to use these cheaper root trainer grade plants in certain places. So just a heads up on that one.
Yep. Thank you, Pim. Councillor Nees?
Thank you. It's great to see that we're starting to move the needle on the Kaiti Falls water quality as a result of the land management work that we've been doing in partnership with the private owners. That's the sort of reporting I'd love to see us move towards, instead of just focusing on how much money we're spent and what the actual outputs that we're delivering by way of, meters of riparian fencing and riparian planting, etc. Really love us to be able to move to, and this is the outcome, just as I mentioned with management comment about it's great to see we're working really hard and, we're increasing our activity, but what is the result on the ground? So if we can somehow in the future have a link to water quality indicators so that we can actually see that the work we're doing is actually improving water quality, that would be the ultimate. And I accept that it might be hard to achieve and it might be slow to get the results that we're seeking, but ultimately that's why we do it. So be great to see more positive results like in Kaiti Fall.
Yep. Comments noted, Jane, but I guess the reporting that we're seeing is what the co-funders want as well in terms of where the money's spent. And yes, that's another outcome that we want to see as a group. What is the effect on water quality? Has the E. coli dropped? That's a good step forward, Pim. You're nodding there, so it can be done.
Yeah, I'm nodding there. I'm also just aware of the science team's feedback to us on the ability to do that within a short space of time. So we're at the moment working with, Rochelle Carter and Rob Donald's advice on what we can confidently say is a trend. But Jackson and I will have a chat with them and see whether we can modify the scorecard to add, perhaps a link to the water quality dashboard that's recently been developed or something like that. That gives you a clear steer on what was it like when we started this and what's it like now.
Yeah, fabulous, Pim. Thank you. Councillor Von Daddelson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a big bouquet to your group here. Action on the ground. It's exactly what we want to see. Pages 233, 234 about the Koperere-Rua Valley. Just first of all, conflict of interest. I am the chair of the Rotary Trust, and there's a lot of really good work going on in there. On the graph on the top of 234, when it says the landowner, that is actually Tauranga City, I believe, is the landowner. And Pim, it doesn't give an indication of the amount of commitment that the regional council has made to that valley, in that we're about to go into a major river realignment there, which will follow with a lot of planting following it. And I think the regional council is contributing something like 1.3 million towards a 4 million. Can you give me the figures just to remind others? Project.
Certainly. So through you, Mr. Chair, the report card here shows operational spending, not capital spending. And what Councillor Von Daddelson is referring to is one of our capital projects where we've partnered with Tauranga City Council to achieve sediment reductions through the Koperere Stream Realignment Project. So the amounts I think are correct. I believe it's just shy of $1.4 million over 3 years from Council's capital budget, from this council, out of a total $4-point-something million design and construct cost, with TCC as the principal.
Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you, Pim. Okay, resolution on page 229. Would somebody like to move the report, Land Management Focus Catchment Highlights Update? Thank you, Councillor Clark, seconded by Councillor Von Daddelson. I'll put that. All those in favour, raise your right hand. Those against, that's a consensus. Motion is carried.
My apologies, Tawna here. Councillor Von Daddelson has declared a conflict of interest, so inappropriate for him to be the seconder.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Clark moved. Councillor Titaru White can second. Thank you for that, Tawna, keeping us on the straight and narrow. Motion is carried. Moving on to 241, page 241. This is the Te Arawa Lakes program. and online, hopefully, is Helen. Are you there? And Chris Ingle, are you there? Oh, Helen.
I am.
Up. Hi, Helen.
Tēnā koutou. Good morning.
Yeah, hi. Floor's yours, Helen.
Thank you. Look, I haven't prepared a PowerPoint. The purpose of my report was to update the committee on the work of the Rotorua Te Arawa Lakes program in the previous financial year with our Pūrongo Tau, our annual report, and that includes the lake water quality results for that year, and also the work that we've been doing in Q1 of this current financial year. So happy to take any questions if there are any.
Any questions for Helen? Councillor Thompson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations, Helen. A great report, really easy to read. Are you able to just give us a little bit of a forecast in terms of how you think the incentives fund is going to go in terms of reaching the 100-tonne target? I see we're a bit shy of the 40-tonne, but we're confident we're going to get there. But what does the future look like as far as you're concerned? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, it looks really positive. This year, we're actually tracking to have an overspend in the incentive scheme, which is the first year that we've managed to spend the budgeted funds. So provided that that tracks as forecast at the moment, so those I'll be coming back to the strategy group to ask to and council to ask to bring some funds forward from future years. So that is positive. So that won't affect the overall spend of the scheme for its lifetime, but it will just mean that we spend more in this current financial year. So we've got 30 tonne. We're looking at having between 35 to 40 tonne by the end of the current financial year. And, we're positive about that. And we've certainly got a pipeline beyond that in future years. We've also got permission from the Crown to spend that money beyond 2022. So we'll be continuing the incentive scheme beyond that and assessing its viability each year when we prepare our annual plan. So it's looking positive. It's taking longer than expected, but originally expected, but that's not surprising really when we think about the change that we're asking people to make.
And I think also, Paula, Plan Change 10 is now a reality, and landowners are reassessing their long-term futures, and some of them who have previously had incentive money are coming back and saying, oh, right, I'm back in the pipeline again. So they're having another bite at the cherry. So yeah, I think the farming community is realising that the money's there, it's first in, first served, and when it runs out, it runs out. So so yeah, there's some positive signs there, Paula, but it's hard. It is tough. Any other questions to Helen? I've got one, Helen, and it's on page 257 of the report. And I know this is an annual report, but I just want to have some sort of positive and information in terms of the deed of funding for the Lake Rotoiti, Rotomā, Tarawera schemes going forward. We've got AGMs coming up in January of Lake Rotoiti, Tarawera, Lakes Water Quality Society. We just want some news, one-pager, key messages that councillors and the chair can give to those AGMs to say the money's available. I know there's a report coming to us in February about the options long-term funding for the sewage schemes, but I'd really like some definite statements from us to be able to say to the ratepayer groups, we are certain of this so far, because there's a lot of anxiousness coming forth from our community in terms of the messages coming out of the strategy group. And so are you able to give us some key messages so that we can go along to those ratepayer groups and say, this is what we know, this is these are the dollars?
Absolutely, yes. I'll make sure that there's something prepared for those in January.
Yeah. Councillor White.
Yeah, kia ora, Helen. It's nice to see you, and thank you for the report. As Councillor Thompson said, it's very clear and easy to follow. Hey, I just wanted to, I'm pleased to hear that Plan Change 10 has had a positive effect on people's interests coming forward. Just a question on Māori interests coming forward. I mean, obviously, there was a keenness in the earlier stages because land was not for sale and it didn't affect the capital value of the farms or the lands they've got. Are you finding Māori coming to the fore in this particular situation, still coming out, showing their interest in this project?
Yes, there's still a good, of those farms, properties in the pipeline, there's still a good proportion of those that are multiple Māori-owned land. There's definitely more land in European title now, which we didn't have in the, in the earlier stages of the scheme. So, but there's definitely a more balance now. Yeah.
Thanks, Helen.
Councillor Nees.
Thank you. Just page 260, Helen, we have the statistics on water quality, and I see that the fecal performance, E. coli for swimming and water quality is poor for Lake Rotorua. Can you tell me, given that there's been reticulation in Rotorua, what is the cause of this? Is it offset? Is it the large number of swans and geese, etc., that we see on the lake? Have we some reason for this? And if so, what are we planning to do about it?
So it's likely to be a combination of those things, plus ruminant E. coli as well. So we have done source testing. We've got different projects around each of the main streams. So for Puarenga, there's a reference group and a large collaboration of people working on E. coli issues in that stream, and found ruminant sources. And so again, we've got a project in that catchment. So it does vary. The Plan Change 10 regulations and the incentive scheme will also contribute to that as well. So they will, they reduce intensity of stocking and control phosphorus and sediment and E. coli loss to the lake. So the program of land use change and land management change that we're undertaking will help with those things. Also ongoing work on reticulation, because there are still properties in Lake Rotorua catchment, although few, that aren't connected to reticulation.
Yet.
So we're still working.
Yet.
Yes.
Yep. Any other questions? So there's a resolution on page 241. Sorry, people. That we receive the report.
Amen.
Moved by Councillor White, seconded by Councillor Eatey. Any further discussion? All those in favour, raise your right hand. Thank you. Motion is carried. Moving on to page 247. So